Welcome back to the Organized Chaos Tabletop RPG devlog. This is our second episode, and today we're going to be talking about skills and attributes. So being a universal system, Organized Chaos doesn't have classes like D&D out of necessity as much as desire. I can't even imagine where you'd begin in making a class-based universal system unless it was something so gameplay light and nebulous you really may as well have not bothered. In developing Organized Chaos, I had one philosophy in regards to skills and attributes, that I want skills to reflect what a character can do, and attributes to reflect how they actually play. What I mean by that is unless you're reflected by some sort of modifier, you just have no relevant skills, or the rare attribute only check, pretty much all your rolls are going to go off your skill points and their dice pools, as I explained last episode with Karate Jim's attempt to kick down a door. The main purpose of attributes is in dictating how much health you have, how fast you move, your turn order in combat, and so on, as I'll explain more later in the video. But first is a more in-depth look at skills and some of the systems surrounding. As explained in the last devlog, whenever you fulfill certain criteria based on your campaign and your game organizer's preferences, be it beating or losing to an enemy, traveling to some hard-to-reach area, talking down that thug who is planning on robbing you, or simply having a nice character moment, you earn character points to spend on upping your skills, buying traits, or degrees of advantage on a roll. However, there is more to putting points in a skill beyond just making your dice pool bigger. The idea is that when you reach a certain threshold in skills, you unlock abilities to use. When you have, say, 50 points in fencing, if you deflect an opponent's attack, you have the option to use your reflex turn to make another attack on them, or something to some similar effect. The actual combat terminology will make more sense in a later video or two when I discuss the combat system itself. Another example could be, say, a trail guide with 20 points in logistics using his ability to make the party travel by the fastest speed attribute instead of the slowest. A 100 debate skill senator using his ability to filibuster in a debate and deny his enemy a chance to speak so long as his social battery lasts him and he keeps rolling successes. All the exact numbers and effects aren't what matter yet. What matters is that everyone understands that when you reach a certain number in a skill, you unlock a new ability within that skill. I'm also toying with two related concepts in that affair. The first being mixed skill abilities. Say if a character has 20 points in holy magic and 30 points in imperial sword fighting, they can power up a sword stroke with divine might for a ranged attack that a pure priest or a pure knight could never do on their own. I'm also wondering if those abilities should cost some points to get as opposed to being free beyond the skill requirements like normal abilities. Because that could fix two problems I thought of when thinking of mixed skill abilities. In that one, it'd be adding further complications to an already somewhat complex system, and two, that it'd increase book flipping for the player and the GO, because if it's something you have to buy and plan for specifically, you won't have the scenario of 2 sessions too late, your GO or player realizes they have a move available that they had no idea about, and all the frustration that comes with. The other idea I'm playing with is having certain abilities locked off behind certain requirements, the easy example being different martial arts in combat and their stances, being that you couldn't use a lot of Wing Chun techniques if you're in a low, heavy forward sumo stance. That would make it where heavily skill-mixed characters won't become OP in terms of abilities, but then again, this could just be complexity for the sake of complexity, and the dice pool system will already encourage character specialization more than enough. These are both concepts I feel will have to be play tested to really get a grip on, but still don't hesitate to comment and let me know what you think about these ideas either. Now that we've gone over skills and abilities more, we can delve fully into attributes and what specifically I mean by attributes dictating how your character plays. To start, there are 5 main attributes: body, agility, perception, charisma, and mind, yet you don't actually put points into these main attributes themselves. You just add each of their 2 sub-attributes to calculate their values. For example, to calculate your body attribute, you add together the numbers of its 2 sub-attributes, strength and stamina. If you have 15 strength and 15 stamina, then your body attribute is 30. The sub-attributes are what you actually put attribute points into. There's 10 sub-attributes in total, leading to what will hopefully be some easy math. First up is body and its sub-attributes of strength and stamina. To put it simply, your body attribute is your health pool, divided by your body stat, the 10 parts of the body I'll go over in the combat video, and that's how much health each body part has. If there's any points left over, they're divided by the upper and lower torso, and if there's still a point left over, then the player decides where to put it. The strength sub-attribute for now only firmly decides the stack limit on objects in your inventory. For example, say a healing potion takes up one inventory slot, but you can stack 2 potions in that one slot before you need to use another slot. If you have a strength of 20, then that stack value goes up, and you can add another 1 or 2 potions to that one inventory slot. Strength will also most likely be one of the more common pure attribute checks you make as you run a game, and that will add value to it as well. I'm also toying with whether or not I want modifiers based on attributes in the game. Say in combat, if you're using a hard martial art like karate, with 20 strength you might add an additional 2 damage to your attack if you hit. But that could also add complications and do away with my easy math philosophy, so I'm not decided on it yet. The stamina sub-attribute is important for combat and travel mostly, as it decides mostly how many combat abilities you can use before needing to take a rest, and how far you can travel before you need to rest as well. To elaborate, that fencing ability I mentioned before, where you can attack on your response turn if you deflect an opponent's attack, say that costs 5 points of stamina to use. A normal attack costs no stamina, so if you run low you're not totally screwed, and doubly so if you're willing to get into the stamina negatives and gain exhaustion on yourself. Stamina's use in travel, what probably has to be the system I am the most proud of myself for creating, is used for everyday travel over your map. I'll clarify more in the video about travel systems, but the gist of it is, whoever is leading the travel rolls their travel logistics, wilderness survival, or whatever other relevant skill, against a target number decided by the terrain and weather they are facing to decide how much stamina usage for that day's travel. Use too much stamina in travel and you get caught out in combat, you might be screwed. Alternatively, you might be unfit to travel after a big fight and might have to face exhaustion if rest isn't an option. Next up is agility, which a lot like body, is also pretty important for travel and combat, along with its sub-attributes of speed and reflexes. Agility, as it is right now, just determines how much stamina you get back while resting, the number itself being how much stamina you get for a short rest, and its dice pool number you gain from a mid-combat rest in one turn. Say if you have 20 agility, then you take a break mid-combat, then you'll get 2 stamina back. If you take a short break after combat, you'll get back 20 stamina points. And with a day's rest, you'll just get it all back. Though I'm not firm on this idea, as I wonder if it could throw the balance out of whack. Not to mention, nobody hears the word agility and thinks stamina recovery. It was just the best place to put it without throwing in another attribute and throwing the math into disarray. Speed, as a contrast, is pretty self-explanatory and actually fits well with its definition. It's how fast your character moves in both travel and combat. The number itself being the miles or kilometers you travel in a day, because I'm going to do the Battletech thing of just saying screw accurate math, kilometers and miles are close enough as are yards and meters, just use them interchangeably. While your speed stat is divided by 2, that's how many grids you can move in one turn of combat. Also, yes, I'm using a grid-based system for combat. For how tactical and compatible with wargaming I want to be, it was either that or use a ruler, and grids are faster, easier, and cheaper, especially because I'm going to be using square grids, which are easy to hand draw as opposed to hexes. Again, I'll get into further details when I actually make the dedicated video or 2 for combat. An example, if you have a speed of 10, then you can travel 10 miles/kilometers in a day's foot travel, while in combat you can move 5 1x1 yard/meter grid squares during your movement turn. And if I go with that modifier system I talked about earlier, speed would be the attribute that modifies combat for soft martial arts, the same way strength does for hard martial arts. Reflexes as a sub-attribute is even more simple. It dictates your turn order whenever such a thing is needed. The most obvious is combat, but it also works in certain social settings, say some sort of grand debate with multiple parties involved, or some long-haul foot race over a vast swath of land. Reflexes work by comparison as well. Whoever has the highest reflexes goes first, second highest goes second, third highest goes third, and so on. If 2 characters have the same number in reflexes, then they just roll their dice pools against each other, and whoever comes out with the most successes win. You just roll until there's a winner. Perception is once again largely the domain of travel and combat. I know this is looking like a very combat and travel heavy system, but I promise the next 2 attributes will be more socially involved. Perception as an attribute represents your character's active and focused perception, how well you do when actively looking for something. Essentially, you would roll your perception dice pool and add the number of your successes to your senses score. Senses is essentially a geo guideline on what subtle details that may otherwise be hidden to tell the players. Basically, it's what your character will notice without any sort of dice roll or check. An extra hint to a puzzle, a tell in a man's face as he lies, a hidden marking on a tree, the attributes of an NPC. The higher it is, the more the geo should be willing to point out for free. The way I'm picturing it now is that for every 20 points in senses you have, your character unlocks another tier of gradually more subtle things they can naturally perceive. Tier 1 being 0 to 19 points, being you only really notice extremely obvious things like an intact sign or massive holes. To say Tier 3 being 40 to 59 points, where you can naturally notice minute details like the leftovers from a well-cleaned pool of blood, or the subtle outline of a secret door seamlessly blended with a wall. If you lose an eye beyond your health, your senses will be the first thing affected. I should also clarify that senses are a general guideline for the geo and not the law of the land. If there's a detail that importantly needs to be hidden, they can just hide it behind a perception check. Character senses be damned. Awareness, meanwhile, is your general field of view as far as your perception and senses stretch. You can still generally see things like structures and enemies on your grid map, as adding a fog of war would honestly be a nightmare to impossible to implement. Your awareness numbers being how many squares in a square radius around your character you can make a perception roll, and half that number being where your natural senses extend to. Factors like darkness can limit this field of awareness even further. Charisma and its sub-attribute social are both the main attributes used for social mechanics, though it does have a standout attribute in leadership, which will be used for the warfare side of the game. Charisma itself represents what is essentially your hit points for the social combat system I call the Battle of Words. Now, it should be noted that your Charisma HP is not the only means of winning or resolving a Battle of Words. It's only to be used when relevant to the story at the geo's discretion. Social is to stamina the same way as charisma is to body, by which I mean social acts as your stamina for Battle of Words, but that's something along with charisma to go over in depth with the social mechanics video, because it does work slightly different than stamina does in combat mostly in its spending. Leadership has largely two competing ideas behind it, the first being that it dictates when your forces are routed, when you're leading an army, the amount of damage your troops take in combat before they disengage and run off or disband for a while or whatever else. The second idea being that it controls the amount of troops your character individually can lead in an army. I'd explain it more if I actually had more than just the early hooks of the warfare system developed. Like the other systems, it'll be elaborated on later in the video. All I have to say for now is that it'll play very similar and be very compatible to the one-on-one melee combat. Mind and its sub-attributes intelligence and will are the most widespread and nebulous of the attribute categories, applicable to most every core of gameplay. Mind as an attribute represents all the parts of your brain that aren't your IQ and your willpower. It's your general wisdom, creativity, and memory. In direct gameplay terms, mind dictates how many custom or non-skill related taught abilities your character can have. In explanation, if your character comes up with some sort of custom punch or kick that has a specific effect, then that's a mind slot filled. Same goes for if you're a karate practitioner, but you're taught a judo grab by an NPC or a party member. If you're willing to fill a mind slot, then you can have that one ability without having the prerequisite skill to unlock said ability. One slot will probably be unlocked for every 20 points in mind, with 0 to 19 points being one slot, and 40 to 59 points being 3 slots. I know I used combat as an example, but this also applies to social and travel abilities as well. Intelligence, meanwhile, acts as something similar to senses, in that it works as your geo guideline on what to tell your players in regards to hints, how a puzzle might be solved, an unnoticed quirk of Duke Francis that could be leveraged against him, or perhaps a better route to the destination than the one the players have planned. Now, obviously, the players don't have to follow the geo's advice, nor does the player with a high enough intelligence have to tell the rest of the party about it once they hear. But overall, it acts as a sort of geo connection to the player, which makes it useful to the players in the geo, as the players will have advanced knowledge through the geo's meta-knowledge, and the geo can use it to help steer the party in the way they want. And like before with senses, intelligence is only a guideline and not the law of the land. You can tell as much or as little as you need depending on the situation. An example, 0 to 19 intelligence would only really tell you obvious things any player could really figure out themselves, along with the occasional reminder of something told to you. 40 to 59 intelligence might give you some solution to a puzzle beyond just a basic hint. Will acts as your general resistance to quite a lot of things. Mental status effects, like those that will be elaborated upon in the Battle of Words video, hypnosis and brainwashing, and being knocked unconscious. Will also dictates how many times you can invoke the near-death mechanic, which will either get its own video or be tacked onto a shorter video than this one. In the resistance side, the enemy trying to give you an effect would roll against your will, which is always a max success of its own dice pool. Meaning with a will of 40, your opponent has to beat 3 successes. There's also an option to contest a mental status if you have a similar skill, say if you're both hypnotist, but in that case it's a competing roll, not the guarantee of the will check. In regards to being knocked out from either a critical hit to the head or a crippled head, their attack roll has to surpass your will in the same way as a mental status. If you meet or surpass their number of successes, you stay up. I won't make, and there should be no skill against being knocked out. The only thing to modify your chances against it should be perks, and how it relates to the near-death system will be elaborated upon when I go into the system itself in a different video. And that was skills and attributes. In review, skills are generally what you roll, and how that affects what your character can do, while attributes affect how your character plays for you, the player. I actually had to redo some of the attributes here because I either wasn't happy with what I first came up with or had generally forgotten what I actually first meant when I wrote it to begin with. At first, intelligence was going to give you bonus character points, and while mechanics-wise that works well, I didn't like how it screwed up the easy math side of things. And perception just said determines trap awareness with no actual explanation as to how, and since I wrote that almost a year ago, I forgot the original context. I for some reason didn't actually write down or elaborate upon it, even if I ever actually knew to begin with. Next video will be world building fundamentals again, as I plan on having the 2 series alternate. The next Organized Chaos devlog will be the first video on combat out of most likely 2, but we'll see how that actually goes. Thank you all for watching, and tell me what you think of all of this in the comments below.